You know, I told you guys in jury selection that we all know each other here and that we have a professional relationship with each other. And I think in this trial you saw everybody really trying to get along and trying to behave professionally. I have nothing but the highest regard for these prosecutors. That being said, I completely and totally disagree with the state's portrayal of the evidence in this case. What you just heard in closing argument was a whitewashing of facts, covering up all the details that make any difference. Fortunately, all of you were here and heard everything that actually came from that witness stand, not a retelling that you just heard. And as the court has instructed you, and it's to the evidence in this case alone that you must base your verdict. It must be based solely on the evidence or the lack of evidence and the law. Let's go through the evidence together. I'm not going to try to belabor too many things, but I think it's really important to look at the testimony of these witnesses, because I would suggest to you that the state's case stands or falls on the credibility of Joseph Butler, Joyce Butler, and Lisa Moore. If you find these people to be 100% credible, and I suggest to you that it is impossible for you to do so, you could convict Mr. Hunter. But I'm telling you that their testimony is not credible, and it's not supported by the evidence. Joseph Butler took the stand, and he's an elderly gentleman. He told you about his apartment complex, which, of course, is indisputable. He told you that he knew Theresa Green as a neighbor. From the stand, he said that he knew her for 3 months. Previously, he had testified that he knew her for over 2 years. But he didn't have much to say about Theresa. He didn't much seem connected to her in any real way. Somebody who lived about 5 or 6 feet away from his apartment for over 2 years. Didn't say anything about his relationship with her, didn't really say anything nice about her or bad, just she was my neighbor, period. It doesn't appear as though Mr. Butler bothered to read the statements he had given to law enforcement or read the transcript of the deposition that he gave years ago. He took the stand and he said, "Oh, my memory is clear. I remember everything better now than I did back then." I am quite certain that he had those transcripts in his possession, and he just couldn't be bothered to read them. I suggest to you that he really did not appear to care very much. He certainly didn't care about being here. He made it very clear to all of you that the reason he didn't ever call the police for this whole thing was because he didn't want to end up on this witness stand. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. He claims that he knew Mike, who is, of course, Demorris Hunter, that he knew him for about 3 weeks. And I would suggest to you that given the fact that he didn't really say anything about his relationship with Mr. Hunter, either good or bad, that he really didn't have much of a relationship with Mr. Hunter at all. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Buxman's portrayal of them as being friends. Apparently, they were going to have a barbecue. I don't know if that's true. You don't know if that's true. But that's what he says. And then he went to Publix with Mr. Hunter and bought some meat. And by the time he got back, Theresa Green was well drunk. It sounded like, and I ask all of you to rely on your own recollection of the facts, it sounded like that probably happened in the early evening of the Saturday, May 26th of 2002, when this is all alleged to have happened. It's probably true that Theresa Green was drinking a lot and that she probably was pretty drunk. He goes on to describe this get-together, which for some inexplicable reason he refused to refer to as a party, that it was going on for some time. They were listening to music, apparently quite loudly, well past 10 p.m. on Saturday night. Apparently he's drinking. Apparently Miss Green is continuing to drink. He admits that Demorris Hunter, known to him as Mike, was not drinking. And he also says that Lisa Moore was not there. He told you that his wife got up a couple of different times to complain about the music. Now, it is, I think, reasonable to assume that by the time she got up the second time, after 2 o'clock in the morning, and this party was still going on, and she supposedly was supposed to go to work the next morning, that she was probably pretty upset. I remember waking up my dad from when we were kids. He would go to bed early and we'd be watching TV and laughing and whatnot. If we woke him up, he'd be pretty upset, right? Because nobody likes to be woken up. So I think that's exactly what happened. Joseph apparently was also pretty upset because he, from all appearances, wanted the party to keep going. He slams the door to the bedroom, and that's nothing he admitted. That's what we got from Miss Butler. And then orders everybody out of the apartment because his wife's angry. And I don't know what this says about Theresa Green, other than I guess she's a pretty ornery drunk. Because when Mr. Butler orders them all to leave, she hauls off and slaps him. Now, you know, I've hosted a lot of dinner parties at my house, and no one's ever raised a hand to me or anyone else when I ask them to leave. So I'm trying to give you guys a picture of what is going on here, right? These are people who've been drinking since early evening, well past 2 o'clock in the morning. Fully to be expected that whoever's still drinking at that hour, pretty hammered, right? And not only hammered, but not very pleasant drunks. And we've all met them before. She hauls off and slaps her host in the face. And he immediately responds by slapping her back. Did any of you think that he was minimizing what he did when he testified from the stand? When he said, I tapped her. Really? No. His wife gave it away. Joyce Butler said no. He smacked her hard enough to give her a bloody nose. Now, a bloody nose is not the kind of thing that you give every day of the week. And it's not the kind of thing you receive every day of the week. Here's what I think. I think it's entirely possible that Theresa Green really got angry. when she saw the blood coming out of her nose. Or her lip. We don't really know exactly where it happened, but Joyce Butler said it was coming out of her nose. We know that when somebody gets smacked like that, right, in our common experience, somebody gets smacked like that and you start bleeding, the first thing they're going to do is rub it with their hand, their left or their right hand, depending on. They're going to rub it with their hand, look at their blood, and go, look what you did to me, right? I mean, they're going to get angry. And we know that that's how Theresa's blood got on the door, right? It was only a little bit. I mean, it wasn't a ton. It was just a little, you saw the photograph. It was a tiny little smudge of her blood got in there. Detective Bergen talked to Joyce Butler, and she agreed, yeah, that's how the blood got on the door. At some point, and you can imagine this thing escalating, right? Starts off with Joyce Butler angrily waking up at 2:30 in the morning and asking her husband to please turn the music down again and please get this party over with so I can get to sleep, so I can go to work tomorrow. Suddenly, Theresa Green hauls off and smacks Joseph. Joseph smacks her back, right? And now the door is open, and this group of people, which apparently included Joyce Butler, are all gathered near the door on a landing that you can look at the pictures. It doesn't appear to be any wider than this podium, and is certainly within arm's reach from one door to the other. You can see the stairwell, and the doors are right there. They can't be more than 5 feet apart. Suddenly, all these people are standing there, according to them, in this story. And by the way, there's absolutely not one shred of evidence that any of this actually happened. Okay? We just have to take their word for it. We don't really know what the details are. We just have to take their word for it. Or not. But the story that they're telling you is that somehow they end up on this landing. And for some unknown reason, according to Joseph Butler, Theresa decides to take her anger out on Demorris Hunter, who's done nothing, isn't drinking. No one even attempts to accuse him of being belligerent or being rude or being angry at her or having any dispute with her of any kind. That's probably true, right? There's one good way to tell the difference between when people are making things up and when people aren't making things up. And one of the ways is if people are telling you things which definitely help them, they might be lying. Whereas if they tell you something that really doesn't help them in any way, it's a lot more likely that it's true, right? Because why would they say it? In other words, when people have motives to lie, that's when they lie. People don't lie just for no reason at all. And when people are motivated to tell the truth, they might tell you the truth. That's not a hard rule, but it's not a bad way to look at things. And according to Mr. Butler, she not only, who by the way also had testified that Mr. Hunter was trying to restrain her from attacking him. Mr. Butler goes on to add that for no apparent reason, she, Theresa Green, kicks Demorris Hunter down a flight of stairs. I mean, that's a severe accusation. That is saying that this person is willing to put someone's life in jeopardy because she's a mean drunk, essentially. Is that true or not? There's no way to tell. There's absolutely zero evidence to back up that version of the facts. You simply have to take their word for it. And I'm going to get into why they might not all be telling you the truth about that. In any case, his story is that the two of them go tumbling down the stairs, head over heels, the way he described it, one over the other, until they land all the way down at the bottom of the stairs. And then they get up and walk back. And he has no interest in knowing anything else that happens after that. He's like, well, I was done. I closed the door, went back into my apartment, and got myself another drink. He testified that the next morning, Mr. Hunter started bothering him very early and asking him to take him to a car lot. When Mr. Butler testified about having had a conversation with Theresa Green about returning her car to a car lot the next day, that was the first time anybody had heard that story. He never told that to the police. He never told that to the attorneys that deposed him. He never even told his wife. I'm pretty sure he had never told that to the state attorney's office either. He got up here and pulled that one out of thin air. Why would he do that? Trying to make himself look good. Trying to come up with a reason why he would agree. First thing in the morning, with a raging hangover, to drive this practical stranger across town to go drop off a car. By the way, we're talking about a Sunday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's the story, that they're going to go return her car to a car lot. Absolutely no evidence to support that. Absolutely no documentation, right? No documentation that this car, I can only assume that the implication here is that the payments were overdue or something. Or they were going to repossess the car. In any case, I would argue to you, you can take that phrase, that statement of Mr. Butler's and throw it out the window. He just made it up now. I guarantee you his memory is not better 24 years later than it was 2 days after this happened. If that were true, he would have told the detectives that that's what happened. He just made it up. He claims that Mr. Hunter comes into his bedroom and just tells him, hey, I need you to follow me and Theresa in my van. And he says, okay. Really? Does that sound like the kind of thing that any reasonable person would do? What the hell are you waking me up for on a Sunday morning? I didn't get to bed till 3 a.m. I'm not driving anywhere. Plus, what are you asking me for? I mean, he says that Mr. Hunter went into his bedroom and woke him up as if they'd known each other all their lives. He also said that Mr. Hunter never promised him anything, never paid him anything, never threatened him. He just did it. He just decided to go ahead and do it. I suggest to you that there is no evidence of any kind of relationship between them that would warrant either one of them asking such a favor from the other. According to him, he gets in the van. He mentions that he never saw Theresa, even though he claims that Mr. Hunter told him, I need you to follow me and Theresa. He never saw her in the car. And he never once asked him, hey, where's Theresa? I thought you said she was with us. Nothing. Says nothing. They get to this Walgreens all the way, and by the way, you know, anybody who's ever driven north on I-4 and gotten off on the 1792 exit in Sanford knows there's a gigantic Seminole Town Square Mall there. It's been there as long as I've been here, and I've been here 50 years, with a huge parking lot. And all kinds of places, all the way down from I-4, all the way into Sanford. Very strange place to drop off a car, right? Does Mr. Butler ask him, what the hell are we doing at Walgreens? Doesn't ask him. Doesn't ask him. Not curious at all. Then he says that Mr. Hunter tells him, oh, I messed up. What could that possibly mean? What do you mean I messed up? I mean, when we use the phrase I messed up, I can mean all kinds of things. I forgot something. I said something stupid. You know, it can mean all kinds of things. And if you say I messed up to me, I would answer, about what? You're my friend. What'd you mess up about? What's going on? There's something I should be concerned with? Nothing. Yes, nothing about what that's supposed to mean. His only response is, oh, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know nothing about it. Really? They drive all the way back, half an hour in that van. There's not a word between them about this. I think that story is highly suspicious. Mr. Butler did admit, when I cross-examined him, the apartment that he and his wife lived in was owned by Florida Hospital. That both of them were employees at Florida Hospital. And that if Florida Hospital got the idea that they had been involved in a crime, that they were in trouble, that they could lose their job and get kicked out of the apartment, both. He admitted it, and so did Joyce Butler, right? So, that, I would argue, ladies and gentlemen, is a motive to lie. That is a motive to protect yourself. That is a motive to stay out of things. You would think it would be a motive to say to Mr. Hunter, no, I'm not going anywhere with you unless you tell me where Theresa Green is. Right? No. Never bothered to ask him. Well, what else could that motivate him and Joyce and even Lisa Moore to do in order to protect themselves from losing their jobs, which most likely didn't pay much, and being thrown out of an apartment, both, if they got in trouble? What would that motivate them to do? Mr. Butler admitted that he knew that his downstairs neighbor, Humphrey Moore, who was renting an apartment to Mr. Hunter, he knew that he was moving out. He knew that his lease was over at the end of that month, which was essentially that week, and that they would, because Mr. Hunter was renting from Humphrey Moore, that he would have to move out too. He knew that. And even though the prosecutor tells you that Mr. Hunter fled town, the fact is, we don't know when he left. He could have left Sunday morning. He could have left Monday morning. If Mr. Butler had called the police Sunday morning, when he got back to his apartment with a concern about what might have happened to Theresa Green, if he had called the police then, the police might have met Mr. Hunter at his apartment as he was moving out. Or we would know for a fact that Mr. Hunter had left Sunday morning. The fact is, he didn't call the police. And when he got back and told his wife about what had happened and what Mr. Hunter allegedly had said, I messed up, the two of them apparently sealed a pact between the two of them, never to speak to this, about this to anyone. You would think that Joyce Butler would look at her husband and say, what are you telling me? What do you mean Theresa wasn't there? Where is she? Right? This is her neighbor. Here's what it would have taken for them to find out if Theresa was there. Not a gesture. Not a scintilla of effort on their part to see if Theresa was okay or to warn anyone that there may be a killer loose. Not a scintilla of effort. Why is that? Why is that? I suggest to you there's only two possibilities. Either one, Joseph and Joyce Butler are two of the most heartless, calloused, indifferent human beings you've ever met in your entire life, and didn't give a damn if Theresa Green was in fact dead. Or they had something to do with it. Lisa Moore, one last thing. Not only did Joseph Butler not call the police, and apparently agreed with his wife to make sure she didn't call the police. When the police did get involved and asked him to provide a DNA standard so that they could exclude him as a possible suspect, he refused. And what is more, right up until this case started, here in 2026, Joseph Butler, who's still alive, could have provided a DNA standard at any point in time. He could have provided his fingerprints, which he never did, to law enforcement. Those fingerprints could have been compared to the prints that they found on the car in the parking lot. That one print that they got, that was a clean print, that was definitely, positively not Demorris Hunter's fingerprint. He could have submitted his print so that they could compare it, right? He never did. And still hasn't to this moment. Lisa Moore was the next one to take the stand, and she testified that she didn't know Theresa Green before she died. Mr. Butler said that she wasn't there until much later. She claims to have been there at some point, showed up with her 6-year-old, and was there with him until 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. She doesn't remember anything about any of the details about the argument, how it got started, and apparently she was sober, but in any case, she doesn't remember what was going on. She doesn't remember Joe slapping Theresa Green, and clearly didn't remember anything about about Theresa Green having a bloody nose or bleeding from the lip. She says that Mike and Theresa fell down the stairs like everybody else. I don't know. It doesn't seem reasonable to me to think of two adults sliding down a staircase on their butts, facing each other like they're on a seesaw. My common sense tells me that didn't happen like that. That doesn't make any sense. People don't do that. If you're on your butt, you might go down one stair, right? You're not going to go all the way down a staircase like that. What are you, on a toboggan or something? Her story just doesn't make sense. I don't know if she saw it or not, to be honest. And y'all don't either. The state's asking you to take her word for it. I suggest that there are reasons which might drive both Joseph Butler and Joyce Butler and Joyce's daughter, Lisa Moore, to come up with a story and to blame Demorris Hunter. I don't know. It struck me as, at the very least, extremely irresponsible of her to put her son, an 8-year-old son, in a car in the parking lot at 3 o'clock in the morning. As a father of two, I can guarantee you that I would never think to do such a thing. I don't know what it says about her, other than that indicates a certain degree of callousness, carelessness with her own son. Maybe she did it, maybe she didn't do it. No way of knowing. But very interestingly, Lisa Moore admits to calling her brother at 3 o'clock in the morning and asking him to come over. The last time I got a call, 3 o'clock in the morning, was probably around 1993. When I was a prosecutor and I had weekend duty, I got a call from a detective. Because that was my job. I had to be available 24 hours a day. That's it. And I've raised 2 children who are both adults now. I never got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. I would wager that very few, if any of you, have ever received a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. A call at 3 o'clock in the morning is the kind of thing that clutches your heart, because it's never good news, right? Especially if you recognize the number. Now, I realize that in 2002, these people probably didn't have cell phones. I don't remember if I did or not. I think I had maybe one of those Razor flip phones or something. But a call at 3 o'clock in the morning is not the kind of thing that you expect. I mean, I suppose if you're the sort of person who's up all night, maybe more common. Generally speaking, pretty rare. So what on earth would provoke Lisa Moore to call her brother at 3 o'clock in the morning, not just call him at 3 o'clock in the morning, but call him and ask him to come over? What could have happened? She says that the reason she disturbed her brother at 3 o'clock in the morning was because she was concerned that Joe Butler might be violent with Joyce Butler. And she wanted him to just check on that. And Joyce Butler didn't remember a whole lot of things, but when I asked her about that, she just laughed. She was, and here's the thing, like, if you've ever been in an abusive relationship with somebody, and I hope that none of you ever have, but if you've ever been in an abusive relationship with someone, and somebody asks you, you know, your reaction is going to be pretty quick. Your reaction is going to be pretty definite. Like, you know what it's like to be abused by someone, to be hit by someone. And she clearly acted like that has never been a concern of hers. So I don't think you should believe Lisa Moore's excuse for why she calls her brother at 3 o'clock in the morning. And by the way, he ends up coming over from wherever it is that he lives. He drove over there at 3 o'clock in the morning to check on his mom. She didn't call him. She didn't call him to say, hey, I'm in trouble, right? She didn't call the police to say, hey, this guy's hitting me. She didn't do anything. I suggest that is not why she called her brother. Now, I don't know why, but there is a possibility. Octavius Hayes testified next. He didn't testify a whole lot. Octavius is clearly an unfortunate victim, not just of his mother's untimely death when he's, at such a young age, but he was exposed to what I think can only be characterized as a just inhuman amount of callousness from the Butlers. Now, these people who had every reason to suspect that something had happened, so they say. When this young man shows up at his mom's apartment, finds the door open or unlocked, goes in and finds some damage to the drywall, her watch on the floor, and her purse overturned, and goes right next to his neighbor's door and asks them. The two of them respond when asked, "Have you seen my mom?" The two of them respond, "Oh, no, we ain't seen her." Really? Not. Well, we saw her Saturday night. She was over the place, and she had a little accident and fell down the stairs, but she seemed like she was fine. We haven't seen her since. What's the problem? What's the problem? No. This pact that they have, the two of them respond. No, we ain't seen her. And that's it. That's it. They don't give him anything else. Now, why on earth would they treat that young man like that? Why? Why would they be so cruel to him? Why wouldn't they help him? I'm still going through the witnesses one by one with you. The next person that testified after Octavius was Mr. Filippucci. And this is a rhetorical question, but I wondered, how many of you noticed that he was the lead homicide detective in this case? He's now retired, he's a pool attendant in the Villages, but he was a homicide detective. and he was the lead detective in this case, I don't think he was on the stand for more than about 10 minutes. Said almost nothing about what he had done in this investigation. Didn't even mention the fact that he had taken multiple interviews of the Butlers and why he had taken multiple interviews of the Butlers. I thought he was going to come back to testify to more. It's not uncommon for detectives to do that, by the way. They start, they tell you some part, then the witnesses who are going to actually testify, and then they come back and then they testify about what those people told them. That's pretty commonplace for us. But he never came back. He never talked about any of the stuff that he did, with the exception of going into the apartment and the photo lineups and the fact that the purse was emptied and on the bed. By the way, about that purse, I want you guys to have a look at the picture again when you go back there. Because it stuck with me that not only is the purse overturned, right? Like, if you're looking for car keys and you want to get them really quick, take the purse, dump it, stick your hand in it, grab the keys and go, right? No. If you look at the picture, you'll see that it appears that every single document in that purse that had been folded up was unfolded and spread out. It looked an awful lot like somebody was looking for some document. Even her driver's license was pulled out of the place, with the little clear plastic cover that we all have. It had been pulled out from there and left neatly on the bed. Right? Whoever went through that purse touched and rummaged through every document, including the driver's license, in the purse as though they were looking for something. I have no idea why that's the case. I have no idea why. But guess who's the only person who's got a fingerprint on any one of those documents? Octavius Hayes. Not Demorris Hunter. Not on a single document. Zero evidence. Zero evidence that he touched that purse or touched any document in that purse. Zero. Officer Schaefer testified after that, and the important thing that he had to say was that Octavius Hayes was the one who called the police, not the Butlers. Next up was Detective Bergen, the other homicide detective, who I told you guys I've known her for a long time.
Mr. Marrera, you may resume.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to express that I really appreciate your patience. This is the only shot I get. I just can't leave anything unsaid. I can't leave any stone unturned in the defense of my client, because I have to make sure I cover everything with all of you in case any one of you missed anything. I was about to talk about Detective Bergen, the other homicide detective in this case. Look, there isn't any other way to say this. I think it's extremely unprofessional to show up as a witness in a criminal trial like this and to look you guys in the face and say, no, I didn't read my statements, I didn't read my deposition, I didn't prepare for this, essentially, which is what she did. Took the stand and said, I don't remember anything, didn't testify about practically anything that she did other than the photo lineup. She's the one who interviewed, along with Detective Filippucci, interviewed Joyce Butler and Joseph Butler and went back there twice. She didn't say a word about what their demeanor was like, how they responded to questions, what were the answers that they gave, what kind of questions she asked them. Not a word about it. It's as though it's as though she doesn't care. He's long since left law enforcement, and really, and that's how it came off. I don't know how it came off to you guys, but that's how her testimony came off. She, when I cross-examined her and tried to refresh her recollection about stuff, she did admit that, when Joyce had told her the first time that Joseph had hit Theresa in the nose hard enough to make her nose bleed, and then that's how the blood got on the door. So I was able to get that out of her. But apparently Joe Butler was successful in convincing these detectives that he didn't know anything about Theresa being in the car, even though he testified from the stand that he suspected that something bad had happened to her. And her testimony, Detective Bergen's testimony, it was, I don't know, 10 minutes, something like that. The CSI officers who testified here, the blatant prints people and the DNA people, I wasn't keeping tabs, but it looked like they testified about 5 times more than the homicide detectives in terms of sheer bulk of information and all of the time that they took up. CSI Thomas testified, brought in a bunch of evidence. You notice that we didn't object to anything coming in. We didn't put up a fight about anything coming in. Why? Because none of it proves anything. None of it. The whole pile of it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that Mr. Hunter did a thing. None of it. The only evidence that shows up with Mr. Hunter's DNA on it is her watch. And we know that the two of them were seeing each other. And it takes nothing more than a brush of one hand to another to leave a sufficient DNA on there for a sample. That's all it proves. All it proves. You notice the pictures of that bathroom that were taken by some of the CSIs. If you walked into that apartment, there was blood everywhere, and there was blood all over the bathroom and everything, you would have something really to suspect. But you see exactly the amount of blood that you would expect from somebody who staunched the flow of blood out of her nose or off her nose. Tiny, tiny, tiny. CSI Kuzma testified about all the evidence that she collected. She, in her testimony, which was videotaped because she's overseas right now, took photographs of the bed sheet that Theresa Green was found neatly tied up in. You should ask yourself, where did that bed sheet come from? Where did it come from? Did it come from Theresa's apartment? Was there, I don't know, I suppose not everybody buys their sheets in sets. I always have. I think most people do. So they match, right? The bed sheet, the flat sheet, the comforter, all match, right? So if you look in Theresa's apartment and you see other sheets that match that sheet, then you'd say, oh, it came from Theresa's apartment, right? Or if it came from the Butlers' apartment and matched the sheets in that apartment, you could say it came from the Butlers' apartment. Nobody took the stand to tell you where that sheet comes from. So you don't know. You just don't know. And by the way, notice in the pictures, there's knots tied in the sheets around Theresa Green's body. Some human being with their hands tied those knots. Not a molecule. Mr. Hunter's DNA is in those knots, or on that sheet, or on Theresa Green's body, or in the trunk of the car, or on the lid of the car, or on the doors of the car, or on the steering wheel of the car, or on the seat of the car. Not one molecule anywhere in that car. Next was Joyce Butler. I don't know what you can make of Joyce Butler's testimony. I would put it to you, spent more time looking away from me and my questions than looking directly at me or you. I think that means, it looked like actually there were parts where she might actually be looking to her daughter to give her answers. I wasn't sure, but I had a concern about it because I knew her daughter was in the room with her as she was appearing on video, so I asked that she be removed. She admitted to you that she lied to the police. Or at least that the first story that she told was not true. And the story that she told the police when they came over, remember, she didn't call the police either. When the police came over, she said, oh no, Demorris Hunter called my husband Sunday morning to let him know that Theresa's car was in the Walgreens parking lot in Sanford. So she was the first one to be interviewed. After that, Joseph Butler was interviewed, and after that, they interviewed Joyce Butler again, and they interviewed Joseph Butler again. Joseph Butler gave a completely different story. According to him, he went with Demorris Hunter to the parking lot of the Walgreens. Joyce Butler also had copies of her previous statements and her deposition, and said she didn't read them before she swore under oath to testify in front of you. I'm quite certain that she had them. I was a tiny bit concerned that maybe she didn't read, and that's why she hadn't read them. When I asked her, can you read? She said, well, I didn't read them. She doesn't remember Lisa being there. She did admit that Joe got angry and when she told him to turn the music down, and that she had to be at work at 7. Interestingly, the story, according to the two of them, is that Mr. Hunter comes in the morning at 7 to wake up Mr. Butler to take him to Sanford, 7 a.m. when she's supposed to be at work. And then he's gone for an hour, comes back, she's still there. She hasn't gone to work. That, I think, makes you question whether the story about her having work at 7 o'clock is true or not. The evidence is that she didn't go. She says that Lisa Moore showed up after the two of them had fallen, allegedly. They decided, apparently on their own, when I asked, did you guys agree to not call the police? She said, no, we decided on ourselves that we were not going to call the police. Neither one of us was going to call the police. And when I asked her about, have you guys ever spoken about this again? Her response was no. We've never spoken about it again. We don't talk about that. I suggest to you that her testimony as a witness, both her and Joseph Butler, is not to be trusted. These are not people that you should rely on in any important decision. And that's how you should consider the evidence that comes from a witness. You should say to yourself, do I trust this person? Would I trust this person with something important? Oh, I don't know, like the life of someone accused in court? Would I trust this person? I suggest to you, I wouldn't trust either one of those two people to take care of my dog, let alone state the life of a human being on their testimony. Because without their testimony, what we've got is a car in a parking lot with no connection to Mr. Hunter whatsoever. None. Mr. Kewen took the stand. After that, he was another person who brought in a tremendous amount of evidence. Again, he did not have Joseph Butler's fingerprints or DNA in order to do any comparison. He didn't have Joyce Butler's DNA or fingerprints in order to do any comparison. He didn't have Lisa Moore's fingerprints or DNA to do any comparison. Officer McDonald found the vehicle in the parking lot. Officer Uglione, the fireman, apparently there was some dispute about getting into the vehicle. I'm not sure why he was called. Mr. Kane showed up and testified that he rolled the prints on Theresa Green and the fingerprints matched. We knew it was Theresa Green in there. They found Mr. Kewen testified that Mr. Hunter's prints were found in his own apartment. Okay. Then we get to Houston. Miss Hewell testified that she responded at some point to a burning van in Houston, Texas. We know that's the van that was being driven around by Mr. Hunter. When she found, or the Houston Fire Department found the van, it was 2 months after Theresa Green had died. 2 months. By the way, we know for a fact that there is no evidence of any crime in that van. No one testified ever that Mr. Hunter had put Theresa Green in the back of that van, which, by the way, would have made a lot more sense. According to Joseph Butler, he claims that Mr. Hunter moved Theresa's 200-pound dead body down a set of stairs and put her body in the back of her own car by himself. Not an impossible feat, but certainly not an easy one. Why would Mr. Hunter involve the Butlers? Why? When he's got a van. If he killed her, all he had to do was carry her out to his van, put her in the van, and take off and dispose of her body anywhere between here and Houston. Oh, I don't know, Louisiana? Lots and lots and lots and lots of places to dispose of a body. But instead, he calls those two people and gets them involved. Why? Why? Why does he have to get rid of Theresa Green's car? What does that prove? It doesn't prove anything. He's got a van. He doesn't need to do that. And that's what you have to ask yourself. Like, does this story that the Butlers are telling you make any sense? Why would he do that? Why would he trust them with that kind of a confession? You could trust them to keep their mouths shut? They owe him nothing. They know him barely at all. The first thing they would do is call the police. At least sensible people would. Decent people would. They would call the police right away. That story doesn't make any sense. Officer Finch came in, told you about the VIN. Officer Gage came in and told you that when he showed up with FBI agents at the house in Houston, Texas, almost a year later, I'm guessing, he didn't say, I'm guessing they banged on the door, said, we've got a warrant for your arrest, and Mr. Hunter takes off back out the back door. I would suggest to you that that proves nothing. I would suggest to you that plenty of people, if police show up at their door with a dog and a bunch of agents, might get scared and might take off. Doesn't prove a thing. He never said anything about Orlando. He never said anything about Theresa Green. All that the state attorney's office is trying to get you to make a connection here that a year later suddenly he's running from this. You don't know if he was wanted for something else. Maybe he had a suspended driver's license. Maybe he had outstanding tickets. You don't know. Finally, we get to the medical examiners. And this is really important because I would suggest to you that there are plenty of reasons for you to have really serious doubts about whether or not Theresa Green was even murdered. Very serious doubts about this. Both Dr. Utz and Dr. Arden told you that as medical examiners, if they hear about a body being in a trunk, their presumption is that somebody got murdered, right? And that's reasonable. It's a reasonable place to start. But it's not the be-all, end-all of the discussion. Why? Well, you heard Dr. Utz agree. You know, people can have other reasons to dispose of bodies besides having killed them. People have motivations for disposing of bodies and inconvenient truth, as we like to refer to it. There can be reasons, and I suggest to you that the reason in this case that the Butlers disposed of this body or had somebody help them dispose of this body was because they could not be found to have been involved in anything that would end up with them being thrown out of their apartment. I don't know, and y'all don't know either, if anyone killed Theresa Butler. We don't know if Theresa Butler didn't just die from falling down those stairs. Remember, she and Joe were involved in a fight. Joe had smacked her. She was really drunk. And she was pretty angry. And so was he. We just don't know what happened after that. We don't know where Theresa Green died. There's no evidence, zero evidence that Theresa Green died in her own apartment. There's nothing that puts her in her own apartment. We simply don't know where that happened. Dr. Utz, I thought Dr. Utz was a pretty honest guy and responded, I think, fairly to a lot of my questions. And I would characterize his description of a lot of the things that he observed in these photographs as being kind of waffly. He said, well, number one, we know he didn't perform the autopsy. So he didn't put his hands on the body and see it from different angles. He told you all, he thought that Dr. Gore, the guy who actually did the autopsy, did a really sloppy job. And that he's the inheritor of that sloppy job. In other words, all the choices that got made for photographs and things like that were done by a guy who did a sloppy job. And he had to try to look at these pictures and figure out what happened. He said, well, they're possibly contusions, hard to say. Difficult to tell what's happening. Kind of looks like fingernail marks. He admitted that a person who's deceased and secreted in a trunk, you're going to look for strangulation, right? I mean, both experts agreed that you kind of start there. But you can't tell what happened from a photograph. He says, I'm not sure because I wasn't there. These are quotes from his testimony. Use your own recollection. But that's how he was talking about it. And you saw his demeanor. He was being very honest and not really sure about a lot of things. Why? Because he's looking at photographs. He's looking at photographs that are years old and not very good. One of the things he mentioned was how, the quality of photographs back then are so much worse than they are now. He says, the hyoid bone, a little darker on one side, could be a shadow. Could be hemorrhage. I can't say for certain. That's what he testified to from the stand. I think this is hemorrhage. A person decomposing, you'll get things that look like hemorrhage. You'll get things that look like hemorrhage. There was no fracture of the hyoid. When he was asked directly, do you believe there's a dislocation? His answer was, I suspect that's what Dr. Gore was taking a photo of. Not yes. I suspect that that's what Dr. Gore was taking a photo of. I'm not sure what that means. It's not an unconditional affirmation of his belief in a dislocation. You talked about petechiae. Most cases of strangulation have them. Remember, the petechiae are little bursts, blood vessels in the skin and eyes that frequently accompany a person who's been strangled. None. He didn't see any. He mentioned, in answer to one of the questions that I asked him about the image that was being shown of the hyoid that had been completely stripped, that wasn't reflective of what the hyoid bone looked in Theresa Green's throat. That was in fact misleading. He admitted that these bruised areas could have happened from falling down the stairs. He told you that when people are strangled, the prosecutor made a lot of this, when people are strangled, they frequently struggle. They fight for their lives. There was no indication that Theresa Green had fought. 0 defensive wounds were located on her body. All of her fingernails were intact. The fingernails were removed at the medical examiner's office. And I guarantee you that if Demorris Hunter's DNA had been under those fingernails, you would have heard it. It was not. Mr. Nunnally at one point used a phrase that sometimes gets bounced around in courtrooms. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's a syllogism that really doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Basically, what that syllogism means is, well, just because we can't prove it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Well, guess what? I don't have to prove that it didn't happen. They got to prove that it did. I don't have to prove anything. They say she was strangled. Well, yeah, the fact that there isn't any petechiae doesn't mean she wasn't strangled. The fact that there wasn't any defensive wounds doesn't mean that she wasn't strangled. The fact that these injuries, so-called injuries, could also have occurred other ways, that doesn't mean that she wasn't strangled. I don't have to prove that she wasn't strangled. They have to prove that she was. And a lot of the indicia, a lot of the evidence that is normally accompanying a person that has been strangled is not there. It is not there. And that's why Dr. Arden told you, you can't tell how this poor woman died. You can't be sure. And you can't just guess. If you're a medical examiner, you can't just guess, right? Your opinion really matters. It makes a big difference. If she wasn't strangled, what are we doing here? The state referred to an image that showed a big dent in the wall in her apartment where the drywall was broken. The implication of that, without any evidence whatsoever, the implication of that being made by the state attorney's office is that Mr. Hunter threw Miss Green into that wall as part of a violent fight. Well, guess what? not 1 milligram of that gypsum ended up on her body anywhere. Not one. If there was any gypsum on her body, you at least could say to yourself, well, she either fell into that wall for being so drunk, or somebody pushed her into that wall. But guess what else? No witness has testified they ever heard a big bash in that apartment. And I would suggest to you, you can't throw somebody into a wall, especially a wall in an apartment building where the 2 apartments are sharing a wall. Everything's connected by wood, right? You would hear that. Just like in any house here, somebody slams the door across the house, you're going to hear it. Nobody said they heard a sound. So we have no idea when that drywall was damaged. And we have absolutely nothing to connect that to Theresa Green. You could throw it out. The judge has already read you some of the jury instructions. And I just want to repeat that I have no idea what happened to Theresa Green. I know she's dead. And I know she ended up in the trunk of that car. I don't know, and you don't know who put her there. All you have is the testimony of very unreliable witnesses who have another reason, perhaps, to lie about what happened on that evening. Here's a hypothetical that is completely consistent with the evidence in this case. Completely consistent. Let's say that Joe Butler and Theresa Green continue this argument that they're having. It becomes physical as they wander out into the hallway. And Joe Butler loses his temper or prevails in the wrestling match between the 2 of them and knocks her down the stairs backwards. And on the way down, she hits her head. And then seconds or maybe minutes later, she's dead. I'm not saying that Joe Butler tried to kill her. I'm not saying that he intended to murder her. I'm saying it's possible that this is what happened. And then what follows after that? She's suddenly dead. Joe is very concerned, as his wife is very concerned, as his wife's daughter is very concerned, that the police are going to show up and try to figure out what happened and blame him, right? Lisa Moore calls her brother. Her brother comes over. Some arrangement is made between the people there to get rid of her and her car. Why would Mr. Hunter want to get rid of it? But if they get rid of it, then they move the scene away from their apartment where they're safe. I don't know that happened, but it could have happened. Joe Butler could have driven that car. And the one print that could prove that he didn't or did is a print that you'll never see because Joe Butler never submitted his fingerprints for analysis. Maybe she died other ways. I don't know. Maybe she made it back up the stairs and went into her apartment and died on her mattress. And then Lisa Moore goes in to check on her and finds that she's dead, and the whole story plays over again. I don't know. There's no way of knowing. We don't know beyond a reasonable doubt that Theresa Green was murdered. The poor thing died, there's no question. But we don't know that she was murdered. If you don't know that, and you have to be convinced of a murder beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, only from the evidence that you heard coming from this witness stand. If you have any issues with that evidence, if you question that evidence, if you think, look, maybe she was murdered, maybe she wasn't, I don't know. I don't know. And you haven't convinced me beyond a reasonable doubt. I have real doubts about what happened here. If that's where you are, you must return a verdict of not guilty. You must. And remember, we talked about this in one here, right? Each of you had to be committed to a scientific evaluation of the evidence, a scientific weighing of the evidence. And the only way that you could come to a conclusion of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt of any crime, let alone first-degree premeditated murder, would be if you had no doubt at all.
Objection, Your Honor, that's a misstatement of the law.
Sustained.
That you had no reason to doubt. No reason to doubt the state's case. And I've given you tons of reasons to doubt. Tons of reasons. The excusable homicide instruction says, when a killing occurs by accident and misfortune in the heat of passion upon any sudden and sufficient provocation. Could that have happened in this case with the Butlers and Theresa Green? It's possible. There's no way to disprove that. It certainly is possible. There's no physical evidence whatsoever that proves that Demorris Hunter killed anyone, let alone Theresa Green. There's no physical evidence which puts Demorris Hunter anywhere near Theresa Green's car, let alone having driven it across town to Sanford. Not one iota of evidence proves this. It's just as likely, any of the scenarios that I told you are just as likely to have happened. As soon as you discount the Butler's testimony, as soon as you say to yourself, look, those people are clearly lying about something. Their recollection is horrible. They don't remember anything. They don't remember any details. They got up here and testified without really any emotion, any passion, any genuine commission to the details, right? I just cannot trust those people. I don't trust them enough to base a conviction of guilt upon. If that is your situation, you must return a verdict of not guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your patience in listening to everything that I had to say. I know it was a lot, and we had a lot to cover. I want you to seriously consider these instructions that you're going to receive from the court, and base your verdict only on the evidence that you heard from the stand. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Bucksmith.